He's a narcissism expert. This is Richard Grannon. Thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. Without a doubt, the first trick to knowing that you're not a narcissist is worrying that you might be a narcissist. That's what someone told me once upon a time. But it's fascinating. I've thought for a long time, ever since there's been this concept of luxury ideologies, the latest Gucci handbag is saying, my kid's trans, that so much of these people who bang on about, refugees welcome, don't actually care about the refugees. They just want to look good on social media.
Yes, and that's what the Crispin's and Bertram's research indicated, isn't it? Is that actually they're finding that a lot of these people who claim to be left-wing are actually authoritarian more than pro-social left-wingers. They're not fighting for the working class. They're not interested in workers' rights. They're interested in performative displays of dominance and power. It correlates very highly, according to their research, with antagonistic narcissism as well as neurotic narcissism. So neurotic narcissism is what we would usually think of as fragile, highly self-victimizing, highly vulnerable narcissism. And then you have the antagonistic, which is more entitled, aggressive, and confrontational. And what they were suggesting is that a lot of people are simply using left-wing ideology as a front. They're riding it like a vehicle to fulfill their own ego needs, and those ego needs turn out to be quite nasty.
It doesn't surprise me, therefore, that we find among professions such as politics and journalism, where I think a self-aggrandizing narcissist might be drawn towards those very public exhibitions of power and influence. It doesn't surprise me whatsoever when you find these sorts of ideologies, this sort of trendy leftism, so popular within that cohort. Do you think that that is a fair assessment to make?
I think so, yeah, because as you alluded to before, and as you alluded to in your very well-written article, you referenced Gadsard's notion of suicidal empathy, and he also posited something called epistemological dichotomania, which is where everything is split into two opposing groups, which is a very infantile way of viewing the world. These are people who do not trade in nuance. They split the world up in this infantile way, good and bad, and then they imbue everything with this suicidal empathy. And a lot of it seems to be for the reaction they can get from others and in order to climb dominance hierarchies. Now, when I was a kid growing up in the 80s, that wasn't what left-wing was about. It was about justice. It was about workers' rights. That's why labor is called labor. These people are not interested in that at all. They're only interested in those groups that are foreign or exotic or from far away. They're not interested in their own people. They're not interested in the indigenous population of their own country at all. In fact, and the research backs this, they're very aggressive towards people. And one of the things that they found in their study is that a lot of this is actually just anti-hierarchical aggression that's playing out.
Yeah, it's interesting because where you've seen the polls change sort of politically, where the working classes are now on the right and the elite are on the left, I wonder how much this has got to do with the sort of prevalence of these luxury ideologies. And a theory that I've read before is this idea that once upon a time you were able to show off to everybody that you were wealthy because you had a smartphone, or you had a brand new car, or you had a subscription to Sky TV. Whereas now, in the world that we live in, with so many finance deals available and the progress of technology, is most people, whatever their strata in life in terms of their earnings, probably have a smartphone. Most people probably have a number of television channels they can watch. Most people now can get on a flight and go get a suntan, whether it be to Benidorm or Bermuda. Most people now don't have a sort of clapped-out Peugeot 205 they've kept on life support down the local mechanics for the last 20 years. They probably have a relatively new addition to their car. And on top of all of this, most people, even if they don't have those things, can use filters and selective editing on social media to curate this idea that they do. And so instead, it seems to me that the only way these days you can demonstrate that you are of the elite is to actually very openly and very sort of exhibition, in a very exhibitive way, show people that you believe in these niche causes, because you know by and large that you're probably somewhat insulated from them, that the migrant hotel isn't going to be at the end of your street, that if your little child suddenly declares it wants to be trans, you can afford all the care in the world to help them. And so all the things that they tend to espouse, which largely go against the interest of other people, they themselves are never on the sharp end of receiving.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it as being an aspect of affluenza, but the way that you framed it there, that makes sense. So if I'm raised in a very privileged environment, and most of the people who espouse these beliefs are clearly very, very privileged, because as you say, they're luxury beliefs. They can afford to have the belief and signal the belief without bearing the consequence of the effects of that belief being enacted. And so, yes, maybe this is the new handbag. Maybe this is just a status hierarchy flex to get you somewhere into the oppression Olympics at some level, even if you're just on the sidelines cheering it on. And that does seem to be a class issue rather than a national or an ethnic issue in this case. I need to think about it more, but the affluenza angle of this is interesting.
Yeah, no, it is, isn't it? Because it's definitely something that's happened politically. Like you said, the Labour Party don't like the working class. They actually enjoy grimacing at the working class. And if they don't grimace at the working class, instead they sort of selectively fetishise the working class, which is why they so like Angela Rayner, because it's, oh, there's Ange, you know, have a vape and a big glass of wine on the beach.
But she's only a token, isn't she? She's only a token. And I think the fact that she's a token just reinforces your point that they actually loathe working class people. I mean, I don't know about the Labour Party in general, but I can say with absolute certainty that Keir Starmer loathes, fears, despises the white working class of the UK, and all of his decisions have demonstrated that time and again. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, no, you didn't at all. It was you throw in a very great, but it's true, isn't it? Something very strange has happened to this country. I get into trouble a lot because I moan about the middle classes, of which I am one. Let's be fair. But I've noticed more than ever there used to be. I don't know if you know. Maybe I'm just sort of looking back at some history that never existed. But I felt that there's now more of a class divide. There's more sneering. There's more snobbery than there ever has been. I mean, maybe it's just when I grew up, I wasn't aware of it so much, but today I just feel as if there's a real battle now. And the fascinating Professor David Betts, who talks about the risk of there potentially being a civil war in the future in the United Kingdom, suggests that this could actually essentially happen between, you know, the urban areas and the countryside, or essentially the working classes and the sort of privileged few. And I want to know what you think about that.
Yes, you're right. It is acceptable, and it has become more commonplace to act like a snob and to sneer, but only if it's done to lower class white people. You can't do it to people who are not from here. That's not acceptable. But really, there's nothing you're not allowed to do to working class white people now. In the culture we have in the UK, they're just trash. You can insult them, you can treat them with contempt, you can exploit them, you can outcast them, you can treat them with derision. There's no consequence whatsoever to that. I'm with you. I'm more middle class, so these are my people, and I do see that sort of similar two things that you've pointed out is definitely happening. One, there's more sort of higher status hierarchy flexing to try and get into the oppression Olympics. These are my luxury beliefs. And at the same time, concurrent with that, a growing disdain for white working class people, which is odd because they form the majority of our country. So we're back to suicidal empathy again. This is a kind of, I don't know where these people think this ideology is going to go. Wars, civil wars, you mentioned the professor. Civil wars and wars are fought by working class men. Yeah. The majority of the working class men in the United Kingdom are white. It might not be very intelligent to treat them with contempt so consistently and so openly.
Do you know, it's interesting as well, I've come up with another theory from the sort of, you know, Alex University of Nothing, which is one thing about the working classes is because they can't afford nannies, because they can't afford cleaners, because they can't afford to just take their car to the garage to get an annual service, they have to work together. They have to help each other out. Oh, you know, I can help fix your car. Oh, I'll lend you my drill. I'll help you put up that shelf. Oh, don't worry, you drop off little Bobby at my front door because you've got to work late this evening. They come together and pull together as a community because they need to. If they didn't do that, they'd be up the proverbial. But also because they don't have a lot, their want for a lot is a lot less. To me, the working classes seem to be people who are just happier in their own skin and happier with one another because they get so much succor and delight from just being in each other's company. And I think as a result, they tend to be, the people most grounded in reality because they don't live as some sort of sheltered existence where, you know, the true cost of things doesn't seem to have any sort of impact on their lives whatsoever. But they also tend to just be more socialised. They go out in and out of each other's houses. They're more generous. They give things to other people. They're more tolerant. It actually seems to me the sort of privileged middle classes, for all of their look at me, I'm wonderful, I care about the Syrian refugees, who are actually the pretty nasty, unsocialised, judgmental yobs.
Yes, they are spiteful, and they're described as by some of my friends very, very spiteful. It's interesting what you say. So yes, if the economic context in which you live forces you to have more of a community focus because you're more dependent on people, that would reduce your latent narcissism and increase your humility because you're asking for favors and you're giving favors as well, which feeds a basic human need. So therefore, people in those environments are actually living in more of an evolutionary match to what we as human beings are adapted to, which is living in tribes. Whereas the wealthy people are, you're right, they're becoming more and more alienated. And there's an effect in animals when they're kept in cages. I think it's called zoomania. So when animals are kept in an unnatural environment for a very, very long time, they develop these strange tics. They'll start plucking at their own feathers or tearing at their own skin or jumping up and down in repeated motions. And you're right, maybe this is something to do with the alienation of their affluence affords middle class and upper class people, is it's actually made them very, very mentally ill. And that's why they're doing this, is because they've gone mad.
That's what I think. I think that's
Our
absolutely
elites
true.
have gone mad.
They're self-indulgent. They don't have any purpose. If you worry about how you're going to pay your electricity bill and if you can afford to go on holiday this year, you don't have enough time to worry what sort of acronym for mental condition you've got and how much, how many therapists you need to see. Pure self-indulgence. I think you're right. Zoomania. Yeah. Do you know, I could talk to you all day. Absolutely fascinating. I'm now going to have to follow this up and do another piece, and I'm especially going to have to use the word epistemological dichotomania because I adored that. Fantastic talking to you.